Things are simpler than you think. Simplify and live without stress. Have you ever felt that your life is more complicated than it should be? As if the daily worries, responsibilities and pressures were crushing you, leaving little room to breathe? Now, imagine for a moment that you could set all that aside and live more simply, more lightly. It sounds impossible, right? But what if I told you it's not? What if the solution to this overload lies in something so simple that most of us overlook it? Something that the ancient Stoics already knew, that the key to a fulfilling life is in simplifying, in thoughts, actions, and expectations. Maybe what causes us the most suffering is precisely the complexity we create ourselves. In this video, I will show you how Stoic philosophy can transform your life, guiding you to find serenity amidst chaos. I will share 9 powerful lessons that will teach you to focus on the essentials, abandon excess, and finally live with peace of mind. Are you ready to simplify your life and find a new way to see the world? Then stay with me, because this journey might be the start of a profound transformation. Let's go. Have you ever stopped to think about how much we complicate life? It seems like we are always chasing something, more money, more success, more recognition. But is all of this really necessary? What if, instead of accumulating and complicating, we embraced simplicity? The truth is, we live in a world that teaches us to want more, to do more, to have more. But deep down, this only brings us more stress, more distraction. It's like we are stuck in a wheel that never stops spinning. And have you asked yourself, until when? Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic sages, said that the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. What if, instead of focusing on everything we don't have, we started focusing on what we already do? What if we set aside the excess of worries and began to see what truly matters? Simplicity is a choice. It's not about giving up your dreams, but about eliminating what weighs you down, what doesn't bring value. Imagine what it would be like to wake up every day without that feeling of suffocation, without the constant pressure to achieve more. Imagine living focused on the essentials, what really brings peace and fulfillment. We complicate life, but we can also simplify it. Stoicism teaches us to separate what is within our control and what is not. What we can't change, we accept. What we can, we act rationally, calmly, and clearly. Now tell me, what part of your life is overwhelming you? What can you simplify? Maybe it's the excess of commitments, the worry about others' opinions, or even that perfectionism that prevents you from moving forward. I invite you to reflect, what is truly essential to you? Embrace simplicity. By doing this, you will be embracing a calmer, lighter life, one that is more truly yours. Let's go together on this journey of discovering what really matters. Leave a comment about what you believe you can simplify in your life today. Let's share our experiences and support each other in this journey to live more lightly. When we embrace simplicity, we realize that many of the things we thought were essential actually just take up space, mentally, emotionally, and even physically. And when we start to eliminate these excesses, something incredible happens. We make room to see what truly matters, and it's at this moment that gratitude becomes our greatest ally. Have you ever stopped to appreciate the simple things in life? That hot coffee in the morning, the smile of a loved one, or even the silence that allows us to take a deep breath. In the hustle and bustle of everyday life, it's easy to forget the value these little things hold. But deep down, they are what give meaning to our existence. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, said that it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. And doesn't that make perfect sense? When we are always chasing more, we never feel satisfied. We are always looking at what's missing, at the next step, at what we haven't achieved yet. But what if we paused for a moment and looked around? Simple gratitude invites us to do exactly that. To stop, look around, and be thankful for what we already have. When we cultivate gratitude, the relentless pursuit of more starts to lose its grip. And you know what happens? We find peace. Because peace doesn't come from having it all, but from realizing we already have enough. Think about it. How many times in the last month have you really given thanks for the simple things in your life? I'm not talking about great achievements, but the small daily blessings that often go unnoticed. The truth is, when we focus on what we already have, life starts to feel lighter, the worries lessen, the anxiety dissolves, and we are able to live the present more fully. The practice of gratitude is a daily exercise, but it has the power to transform our perception of wealth and happiness. When you wake up, instead of thinking about all that you need to do or what you haven't achieved yet, how about starting the day by giving thanks? Be thankful for the bed you slept in, for the health that allows you to get up, for the opportunity to live another day. It seems simple, and it is, but in that simplicity lies the secret to a fuller life. And now I ask you, what are you grateful for today? What small thing can you recognize as a blessing in your life right now? Cultivating gratitude frees us from the need for more and connects us directly to inner peace. By cultivating gratitude for the small things, we start to realize the true value of living with less. The more we focus on what we have, the more we see that the excess of everything, whether it's possessions, commitments, or even desires, doesn't bring us happiness. In fact, many times it just takes us further away from it. And this is where moderation, another essential Stoic principle, comes into play. We live in a society that tells us that the more we have, the happier we'll be. More money, more status, more achievements. But honestly, how many times have you achieved something you really wanted, only to realize that it didn't bring you the satisfaction you expected? What Stoicism teaches us is that true happiness isn't in more, but in balance. Less is more is not just a pretty phrase, it's a philosophy of life. When we learn to moderate our desires, we start to live more lightly, more consciously, and above all, more present. Moderation helps us avoid extremes, and it is in extremes that we find stress, anxiety, and exhaustion. Let's think about work, for example. How many times have you felt tempted to overcommit, believing that this would bring more success? We spend extra hours at the office, answer messages late at night, and dedicate ourselves without limits. But the truth is, overworking not only harms our health, but also drains our mental energy and prevents us from living fully. And the irony? Many times, the more we work, the less productive we become. The same happens with life's pleasures. We all like to enjoy good moments, whether it's a delicious meal or a night out with friends. But the Stoics remind us that even pleasure should be enjoyed in moderation. When we indulge in excesses, whether it's with food, fun, or anything else, we end up losing the true essence of these moments. Marcus Aurelius taught us to be grateful for what we have without being slaves to constant desire for more. Because uncontrolled desire leads us into an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. Think about it. How much emotional energy do you spend always wanting the next step, the next achievement, the next level? And how much does this keep you from living in the now with more balance? The practice of moderation also applies to our relationships. Sometimes, in the attempt to please or control others' actions, we get involved in emotional extremes that only bring frustration. The Stoics teach us to love without attachment, to care without overdoing it. This doesn't mean being cold or distant, but maintaining the balance that allows us to preserve our inner peace without depending on others to be happy. Less is more. By applying moderation in our lives, we create space for what really matters: health, peace of mind, and a balanced life. The Stoics knew that excess leads to imbalance, and imbalance is the root of stress. So I invite you to reflect. In which areas of your life are you indulging in excess? Be it work, pleasures, or even relationships? Are you seeking too much, expecting too much, trying too hard? And by doing so, are you perhaps distancing yourself from what truly matters? Moderation is a conscious choice. It doesn't limit us. On the contrary, it frees us. By moderating our desires and actions, we can enjoy just enough without losing ourselves in excess. Imagine what it would be like to live with more control, more balance, more contentment, less stress, less anxiety, and much more peace of mind. The Stoics remind us that when we avoid extremes and seek the middle ground, we find true virtue. And for them, virtue is the path to a fulfilling life. Maybe moderation is the secret to finding more happiness in the now without always searching for something more. By living with moderation, we realize that balance doesn't just apply to our actions, but also to our expectations. After all, how many times have we been disappointed? Not because things went wrong, but because we expected too much or what was beyond our reach. When we learn to master our expectations, life becomes much simpler. How many times have you been disappointed because things didn't turn out the way you expected? We create expectations all the time, in our relationships, at work, in our personal achievements. And the problem with expectations is that many times they are not aligned with reality. The truth is, most of our suffering comes from the unrealistic expectations we place on ourselves, others, and the world around us. The Stoics, like Epictetus, taught us that suffering doesn't come from what happens to us, but from how we interpret what happens. And one of the most effective ways to reduce this suffering is to learn to manage our expectations. Think about it. How many times have you been frustrated because something didn't go as planned? Was the problem in the situation itself or in your expectations of it? Often we expect everything to happen the way we envision. But life, as we know, doesn't work that way. When we set expectations too high, whether about our performance at work, other people's behavior, or the results we want to achieve, we are setting ourselves up for frustration. The Stoics teach us to focus on what is within our control, and this includes our own actions and attitudes. What is outside our control, like other people's opinions, external circumstances, or even how events unfold, must be accepted. We can't control everything, and the more we try, the more stress and suffering we accumulate. Mastering expectations means aligning what we desire with what is possible, with reality. This doesn't mean we should give up on our dreams or goals, but rather learn to adjust our expectations according to what we can control. For example, instead of expecting others to react exactly as we would like, we can focus on what we can do, on how we can behave, on how we choose to respond. This changes everything. Life becomes lighter when we adjust our expectations. There's no longer the constant pressure to control the uncontrollable. There's no longer the burden of expecting everything to happen perfectly. What exists is serenity, acceptance, and focus on the present and what we can do now. I invite you to reflect. What expectations have you placed on yourself and the world around you? Are they aligned with what you can control, or are they keeping you from the peace you so desperately seek? When we learn to master our expectations, we find more serenity and avoid unnecessary suffering that comes from expecting what we cannot guarantee. When we master our expectations, we learn to let go of control over what we can't change. But there is something we can always control and influence: the now. The present is the only moment we truly have, and it is where we should place our attention and energy. How many times have you found yourself stuck in the past, reliving situations that have already happened, or worried about the future, anxious about what's to come? Amidst these thoughts, the present, the only time we really have, goes unnoticed. Life happens now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but in this exact moment. And it is here in the present that true happiness resides. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic emperors and philosophers, taught us that time is like a river of events, and as soon as something is brought forth, it is swept away and replaced by another thing, which will also be swept away. What did he mean by that? That life is in constant motion, the past is gone, and the future is uncertain. The only moment we can truly influence is the now. When we focus too much on what has already passed or what is yet to come, we miss the chance to live fully in the present. The mind becomes agitated, full of regrets or fears, and this prevents us from appreciating the small wonders happening right in front of us. A sunset, an honest conversation, the aroma of coffee. All these experiences are rich, but we often don't notice them because we are too preoccupied with what we can't change or predict. The Stoics teach us that happiness lies in living with full attention, in being present in each moment without being carried away by the distractions of the past or the uncertainties of the future. This doesn't mean we should ignore what has already happened or stop planning for what we want for the future, but it means we shouldn't cling to them in a harmful way. When we live in the now, we find a peace that is not available anywhere else. After all, what causes us so much suffering is our mind wandering into times that no longer exist or that haven't even arrived yet. But the present is here, ready to be lived, to be appreciated, to be felt. And it is here that we can actually do something. Whether it's to change a situation or simply to enjoy the moment. I ask you, how many times have you missed the chance to enjoy the moment because you were caught up in worries or past thoughts? How about doing an exercise now? Take a deep breath, feel the air coming in and going out. Look around, listen to the sounds, notice the sensations in your body. This is the present. It's the only thing we are guaranteed. And it's also where we can find true peace and contentment. Life is made of moments, simple moments, grand moments, but all of them happen now. If we learn to focus on the present, we will be giving ourselves the greatest gift of all, the gift of living fully. So what is keeping you from living in the now? What from the past or the future is stealing your attention and pulling you away from the present? Let's make a commitment. Leave in the comments something simple you can do today to appreciate the present moment more. Together, we'll learn to live the now with more fullness and presence. By appreciating the present moment, we realize that the true value of life is here, in the now. But to live this moment fully, we need to learn to depend less on external factors for our peace and happiness. This is where the practice of emotional self-sufficiency comes in. Have you ever felt that your happiness or tranquility depends on circumstances or other people's actions? How many times have you found yourself waiting for external validation to feel good about yourself? Stoicism teaches us that to achieve true peace of mind, we need to stop seeking outside what can only be found within us. Emotional self-sufficiency is the ability to find strength, balance and happiness within ourselves without relying on external factors that are beyond our control. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, said that what matters is not what happens to you, but how you react to it. This simple truth reminds us that while we can't control what life brings, we can always control how we choose to deal with it. Imagine if you could face the challenges of daily life without being deeply shaken by other people's opinions, adverse circumstances, or life's uncertainties. Imagine if your inner peace were unshakable, no matter what happens around you. This is the essence of emotional self-sufficiency. Life is full of ups and downs, and that's inevitable, but the Stoics believed that true strength comes from within. It's not success that defines your peace, nor should failure take it away. Similarly, it's not others' words or actions that should dictate how you feel about yourself. True emotional freedom arises when you free yourself from the need for external approval, the constant search for recognition, or the dependence on factors you can't control. This doesn't mean you should isolate yourself emotionally or ignore relationships. On the contrary, the Stoics valued relationships but understood that their value must come from within. By cultivating virtues like resilience, wisdom, and courage, you build a solid foundation for your emotional self-sufficiency. These virtues help you deal with any situation more balanced and serenely. Now I ask you, how much of your peace depends on external factors? How much do you still worry about others' opinions or the recognition you haven't received yet? What if you could live with the certainty that no matter what happens out there, you are well within yourself? The practice of emotional self-sufficiency begins with the understanding that you already have everything you need within yourself. It starts with the acceptance that the only thing you can truly control is your own mind, your own actions, and your reactions. And that alone is an unparalleled source of power. The Stoics invite us to reflect on our emotional expectations. If you feel like you are constantly searching outside yourself for the solution to your internal dissatisfaction, maybe it's time to turn inward. What have you been cultivating in your own mind and heart that can strengthen your emotional resilience? By practicing emotional self-sufficiency, we realize that much of our balance comes from within. But maintaining that balance requires more than just internal control. It's also about the choices we make. And one of the most powerful choices we can make is learning to say no. How many times have you said yes when deep down you wanted to say no? Whether out of fear of disappointing, seeming selfish, or simply avoiding conflict, we end up committing to things that aren't important to us. And the result? We become overwhelmed, stressed, and distant from what really matters. The Stoics understood that time and energy are limited, and to live a life of purpose, it's essential to know where to invest these precious resources. Saying no is not an act of rejection, but a conscious choice. By saying no to what doesn't align with our values or what overwhelms us, we are actually saying yes to our inner peace, our well-being, and a more authentic life. Many times, we feel like we need to always be available to others, to work, to external demands. We want to please, to be useful, to be accepted. But as Epictetus teaches us, we cannot control others' opinions, only our actions. And the truth is, by trying to please everyone, we end up moving away from who we really are and from what we really need. Saying no is a form of self-care. It's recognizing that you have limits and that respecting them is essential to living a balanced life. After all, if you are constantly saying yes to everything and everyone, who is taking care of you? If we are always responding to external demands, we end up exhausted, with no time or energy for what truly brings us happiness and purpose. Imagine how your life would change if you started saying no to what overwhelms you. What would change? Maybe you would have more time to take care of yourself, to do the things you really love, or to be present with the people who matter. By learning to say no, you create space for what is truly essential. The Stoics remind us that living a virtuous life isn't about doing everything or pleasing everyone. It's about making choices aligned with our values. And often that means refusing what doesn't contribute to our peace and well-being. And that's okay. Saying no isn't being selfish, it's being wise. It's understanding that by taking care of yourself and respecting your own limits, you are putting yourself in a better position to help others when it's truly necessary. When you learn to say no, you start to live more authentically with purpose and balance. So, I ask you, where in your life have you been saying yes when you should be saying no? What commitments, responsibilities, or expectations are overwhelming you? How about starting to practice saying no today with respect and assertiveness, prioritizing what truly makes sense for you? By learning to say no, we understand that respecting our limits is a sign of strength, not weakness. But saying no to others is only part of the process. What about saying no to the unrealistic expectations we place on ourselves? This leads us to the importance of accepting our own limitations. We live in a world that glorifies overcoming challenges, where the constant message is, you can do anything if you try hard enough. But is that really true? Is always pushing beyond our limits the path to true happiness? The Stoics teach us the opposite. True wisdom lies in recognizing our limitations and living according to them. Accepting your limitations is not an act of giving up. On the contrary, it's an act of wisdom and self-awareness. It's understanding that we are human, imperfect, and that we have limits, whether physical, mental, or emotional. By recognizing how far we can go, we avoid the frustration and exhaustion that come from trying to achieve unattainable goals. More than that, we free ourselves from the constant pressure to be perfect, to never make mistakes, to never fail. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic masters, said that happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one thing. Some things are within our control and some things are not. And that includes our abilities and limitations. When we try to go beyond what we are capable of, when we compare ourselves to others or pressure ourselves to be perfect, we are setting ourselves up for failure and dissatisfaction. Think for a moment. How many times have you overwhelmed yourself with responsibilities you knew you couldn't fulfill? How many times have you placed on yourself the pressure to be flawless, to never make mistakes, to never disappoint? The reality is that we all have limits, and ignoring them only leads to stress and frustration. Accepting your limitations is an act of freedom. By recognizing that we are not perfect, we take the weight of perfection off our shoulders. This doesn't mean we should stop seeking growth or give up on our dreams, but rather that we should be kind to ourselves in the process. The path of life is made of failures and successes, and it is through these failures that we learn and evolve. By accepting our imperfections, we also open space for self-compassion. We understand that it's okay not to be able to do everything all the time, and most importantly, we realize that our limitations don't define us. They are part of our journey, but not the final destination. Stoicism teaches us that by stopping the fight against what we can't change, we find serenity. So, I ask you, what limitations have you been ignoring or trying to overcome at any cost? What can you do to start accepting your imperfections and live more lightly? By accepting your limitations, you will be choosing a more balanced life, where the pursuit of perfection gives way to the pursuit of authenticity and inner peace. Accepting our limitations brings us an inner peace that can't be found in perfection. But often, what prevents us from achieving this peace are the complicated and distorted thoughts we've built up over time. The next step is to learn to declutter the mind and simplify our way of seeing the world. How many times have you found yourself creating problems that don't even exist? Reliving conversations, imagining negative scenarios, worrying about things that haven't even happened yet. It's incredible how our mind has the power to turn something simple into something much more complicated than it really is. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus taught us that it is not events themselves that disturb us, but the interpretation we make of them. And often, it is these interpretations that make life harder than it should be. The truth is, many of our problems exist only in our heads, the result of exaggerated thoughts, assumptions, and unnecessary worries. Decluttering our thoughts begins with a simple step: observation. Stop for a moment and observe the thoughts passing through your mind. How many of them are based on reality, and how many are just creations of your imagination, drawn by anxiety and fear? By practicing self-observation, we begin to notice that many of the thoughts that trouble us are unfounded. They are just mental noise that complicates how we see the world. When we manage to declutter the mind, something incredible happens. Life becomes lighter, situations stop seeming so chaotic, and we can see things more clearly and rationally. Instead of being swept away by a flood of thoughts, we start questioning them. Is this really true? Am I exaggerating the seriousness of this situation? These are powerful questions that help us simplify. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reflected a lot on the power of our mind. He said that our life is what our thoughts make of it. If we fill our minds with unnecessary worries and exaggerated assumptions, that's how we will see the world, as a chaotic and stressful place. But if we learn to keep our thoughts simple and focused on the present, life becomes more peaceful and manageable. Simplifying the mind doesn't mean ignoring problems or being naive. On the contrary, it means looking at situations with objectivity, without the layers of complications we create. It's about learning to focus on what we can control and letting go of what is beyond our reach. When we do this, anxiety decreases, stress dissolves, and we find the serenity we've been seeking. So I invite you to reflect. How many of your problems today exist only in your mind? How many are the result of exaggerated interpretations or assumptions you've made without certainty? Decluttering your thoughts is a process, but it's one of the most powerful steps toward living with more peace and clarity. Throughout this video, we've explored valuable lessons from Stoic philosophy that can profoundly transform the way we live. Each of these steps brings us closer to a lighter, more authentic, and more peaceful life. The great truth is that life doesn't have to be as complicated as it seems. Many times, it's us who create the chaos around us, and the Stoic teachings show us that by focusing on the essentials, we can find serenity amidst chaos. It's in our hands. Now I invite you to reflect on what you can do today to apply one of these lessons in your life. Maybe it's simplifying your thoughts, saying no to a commitment that overwhelms you, or simply being grateful for what you already have. Whatever it is, take that step towards a life with more purpose and inner peace. If this content resonated with you, don't forget to leave your like, because it helps to spread this message to more people. And if you're not yet subscribed, subscribe to the channel to keep receiving videos like this one, full of reflections that can change your life. Let's go together on this journey of growth and transformation. Leave in the comments which of these Stoic lessons you intend to apply from today. I'd love to know how these ideas can impact your path. See you soon.